Hi, I'm Father Robert Spitzer with Healing the Culture. The culture has changed Jesus' age-old definition of love, and not for the better. Today we see very steep declines in emotional health, relational health, spiritual health, and of course, as a result, cultural health. I'll explain that in a moment. Let's start with Jesus. Jesus transformed the notion of love for 2 millennia. First, he transformed the prioritization of love from a virtue among many to, the highest virtue in terms of which all other virtues must be defined, must conform. And furthermore, he changed the definition of love for 2 millennia. Instead of the old definitions of love like storge, which were feelings of affection, or philia, which was mutual friendship and expected some kind of reciprocity in order for the friendship to survive, or eros, which was mere sexual romantic feelings, which could be completely apart or separated from a commitment to another human being. Jesus actually said that love was, first and foremost, self-gift, that it was a gift of ourselves. For what? For the good of the other. Well, what is the good of the other? The good of the other has to include the whole person, body and mind and soul, the transcendent element as well as the immanent element. And furthermore, it had to be, the good of the other had to be for the long term, even the eternal term. Now that love also has to include some genuine care for the other. And that genuine care for the other that leads to the good of the other, the self-gift that we're giving for this care of the other, has to, in some sense, include our willingness to make a sacrifice, our willingness to spend time or to spend resources or to sacrifice ourselves in order to accomplish the good without necessary expectation of return. Now, that is a real transformed definition of love. In fact, it was so transformed that the early Christians had to cast about, for a word for love, because storge wouldn't do it anymore, philia wouldn't do it anymore, eros wouldn't do it anymore. And so they lighted upon agape, which would be this kind of love which was, gift of self, this kind of love which committed ourselves to others, this kind of love that included a self-sacrificial kind of care, the expenditure of time and resources, something for the good of the other, where the good of the other includes the whole person, body, mind, and soul, as well as the long and eternal term. Now, what is love not? Our culture has given us a whole lot of sort of sophistical notions of love these days. One of them, of course, is the idea that we can go ahead and mutually use one another for our self-gratification in the short term, and then just abandon the other person as if they were a good tool for my pleasure. That's not the Christian view of love. And I don't have to tell you, it's really leading to steep declines in emotional and relational health in our culture, not to mention spiritual health. Love is not giving a person what they want when they want it, regardless of whether or not that want is going to be for the good of the whole person, body, mind, and soul, the good of the whole person in the long term and in the eternal term. We have to consider what that want is and whether it is good for the person and the whole person in the long term. And finally, love is not also abiding an opinion of another person, whether that opinion is self-destructive or not, simply to be nice. Being nice is not love. Being nice, regardless of whether that niceness is going to lead to ultimate self-destruction of the whole person in the long run, is not love. In fact, it's the contrary of love, even though the culture tells us otherwise. So, what has happened in our culture when we deviate from this notion of love? Well, We can see in pre-Christian cultures, right, that certainly Roman slavery and the Colosseum, I mean, there was certainly no notion of Christian love there, but Christ transformed it. And notice what happens the minute Christ transforms that pre-Christian culture. What happens, of course, is, first of all, we created right away, the Christian culture created right away the largest healthcare institutions. By the way, to this very day, right, the Catholic Church still controls 26% of the healthcare institutions in the world, and created the largest public education system. Regardless of whether you're a Christian or not, you can take advantage and be educated by Christians. And now we've got the largest Catholic Church, it's the largest public educational system in the world today. I mean, 98,000 middle schools and elementary schools, and 47,000 secondary schools, and 1,700 colleges and universities, etc. And furthermore, it is the largest public welfare system in the world today. We're talking about from orphanages to marriage clinics, etc., to grieving institutions, all kinds of things for the public welfare of people. The Catholic Church, again, the largest institution along those lines. But why? Why? Because Jesus' notion of love and the Holy Spirit coursing within us and the interpretation of the Catholic Church so that we didn't deviate from Jesus' true intention on that notion of love. When these things were carried forward, it not only led to these great institutions of public health and public education, but led to inalienable and individual rights. Bartolomé de las Casas, a Dominican friar, and Francisco Suarez, who was, of course, the Jesuit who actually discovered the notion of inalienable rights, which John Locke later borrowed, and Thomas Jefferson, and so forth, through the good auspices of Hugo Grotius. So if you take a look at all of these things, the Christian notion of love really did have real effects on the world, good effects. Today, of course, we're deviating from that. And when we are deviating from it, well, you can see that when Nazi Germany deviated from it, when Stalinist Russia deviated from it, when Maoist China deviated from it. And furthermore, let's just take a look at the deviations today. I mean, yes, you can do anything you want. Unmitigated sexual expression, that's love. That's just really good for you. Or is it? As now we see today, skyrocketing increases in suicides and skyrocketing increases in depression and anxiety. Is this related specifically to sexual behaviors from premarital sex to same-sex lifestyle, to a variety of other things that we can absolutely. I've written an entire book on it that's coming out soon called The Moral Wisdom of the Catholic Church, a defense of her controversial moral teachings. So all of these things are related to the increase in depression, the increase in homicide, the increase in anxiety, the increase in familial tensions, the increase in substance abuse, and above all, the increase in suicides. So we have a big, big challenge before us as Christians. But before I get there, this is really an important principle. There's one other huge foundational principle that is included in the notion of love that I just gave you, Jesus' notion of love I just gave you. And what is that? It stands on the principle of the intrinsic and unreserved value of every human life. That intrinsic value means that nobody has to prove themselves to have value. They don't have to have a GPA of XYZ. They don't have to have this much money. They don't have to have that much education. They don't have to have this much promotion or status within the culture. They don't have to earn any value. They have intrinsic value in and of themselves. And furthermore, it's not just that they have intrinsic value, they have unreserved value. You cannot use an extrinsic criterion, whatever it may be. Yes, thank goodness it's not athletic ability or height or something of that nature. I mean, I could be disqualified. I hope it's not vision in order to be a good human life. I have to have visual responsiveness or something since I'm blind. The point, of course, is pretty clear that anytime we stick an extrinsic reservation on the value of another human life, we are going to get problems. We're going to get marginalization of people. We're going to get people who are, obviously, prejudiced against certain groups of people, or we're going to get even genocides of groups of people. So we have to, this is grounded in the intrinsic and the unreserved value of every human life. And Jesus said it. You can't say one group, another group. It has to be every single human person. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. To any one of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. Even the most vulnerable in our society, like the unborn and the elderly and the impoverished and the uneducated and those with physical and intellectual challenges. All of these people have the same intrinsic and unreserved value as everybody else. Indeed, says Jesus, the equivalent of the value of me, the Son of God. So the point, of course, is, that's our Christian view of life. Has it done us well in 2 millennia of culture? Yes, it's kept us from destroying ourselves at least 1,000 times over. But now we've gotten to a point where we are really challenging it again. The culture is coming out with its sophistries. The culture is saying, oh no, there's the unborn, the elderly over here, the physically handicapped, the mentally handicapped. We can make some reservations here, surely, for at least economic, right, extrinsic value, circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is, well, how long will this endure? Not long. Which brings me to my final point. What's the hope of our culture? You're the hope of our culture. If we do not get out there and influence not just the media, though sure, if you have got media influence the media. Not just the education system, but if you can get onto a board of, your educational system, or you can do something for somebody in the educational mode, get on that board and bring this definition of love and this definition of the intrinsic unreserved value of life into your community. But also talk about it to your neighbors. Talk about it to your family. Start at home first. Because we are responsible for re-educating our culture. Our culture right now is on a very deviant path. And if we continue on that path, if we continue on the path of skyrocketing increases in suicides, this is all pre-COVID, by the way, skyrocketing influences in increases in suicide, skyrocketing increases in substance abuse, familial tensions, depression, anxiety, and the rest of these kinds of negative factors, we're going to see a rapid decline in emotional health, relational health, spiritual health, certainly, and of course, in the end, cultural health. Yes, the infighting within culture is going to continue to increase, and eventually we will probably tear ourselves asunder if we do not respond to the challenge to get this new, not really new, it was always Jesus Christ, age-old, 2 millennial notion of love back into our culture in every way that we can. If we accept the challenge as Christians, as Catholics, there's hope. But if we do not, I'm afraid that we must say in the long run that there's not much hope for our culture. It will go the ways of all other cultures that have pretty much allowed themselves to be extinct through implosion. Anyway, I leave you with this thought and this challenge because, of course, the notion of love we have is beautiful. And I want us all to be participators in healing, indeed saving the culture. I'm Father Robert Spitzer for Healing the Culture. If you want some additional videos and you want perhaps other helpful resources, why don't you go to healingtheculture.com. Healingtheculture.com. Thanks for now.